Let's talk about this as well. From my friends over at Metal Injection, this is the Evolution of the Breakdown mini documentary. And I'll be interested to see what they have to say about this, because I have a video by almost the exact same title, The Evolution of Breakdowns, from 3 years ago, which has almost 500,000 views now. So I consider myself somewhat of an expert on breakdowns. As someone who produced my own mini documentary on breakdowns, let's see what our friends at Metal Injection have to say about the evolution of the breakdown. Let's see. Hell yeah, brother.
The metal
about time for some
has
real
more
music.
Traditions at live shows than can be counted. The sign of the horns, headbanging, crowd.
Hell yeah. Wait, kilts? Wait a minute. Of all the things, so he's talking about all the traditions at live shows. Who is this band wearing kilts? Hell of a way to start the video about breakdowns, but here we are.
Crowd surfing, stage diving, and even just the middle finger. The list goes on. But if you were to ask any metalhead in the mosh pit what moments get them going, what really puts them in the mood to absolutely...
Ask any metalhead in the mosh pit what moment gets them going. Hey, metalheads in the mosh pit, what moments get you going?
You'll probably get the same answer. The breakdown. Breakdowns are not only iconic, groovy, and face-crushingly heavy, they've also long been a staple in mosh pit culture.
Now, here's what's interesting to me. Here's Metal Injection. And again, these are literally my friends. I sincerely love Metal Injection. I've known the guys that started that site for a very long time. They are my friends. So there's zero shade intended, although they're not part of it anymore, but whatever. It's very interesting to me that now you have a site like Metal Injection talking about breakdowns as being like part of metal. Do you remember, say, 15 years ago, in the mid to late 2000s? Do you remember what metalheads said about breakdowns? Do you remember what word they used to describe bands that had breakdowns? Do you guys remember? Anybody remember that word? What word they used? They used the G word. That's right. So it's very interesting to me that breakdowns are now considered canon. They've been retconned as canon. But, all of us, what we knew all along is the breakdowns are awesome and great. But as always, it takes metalheads a good 10 or 15 years to catch on to things. The kids were right. Just took the metalheads time to catch on.
But where did this staple originate? How did they come to be so embedded in metal? And who played the first breakdown?
Okay.
In this video, we're going to break down the history of the breakdown, from its pre-metal roots to what it is today, and get to the root of those questions.
So we'll see if they cover this, but it's talking about the pre-metal roots. So one thing I think is interesting is, that I don't think a lot of people are aware that breakdowns really kind of have their roots like in funk and jazz and stuff like that. I'll see if they cover that. That's right. Breakdowns used to be a dividing line. Back in the day, if your band had breakdowns, it was the G word, right? Not metal. It was false metal with the G word. And then somewhere along the line, metalheads said, hey, actually, breakdowns are amazing and great. It just took them 10 years to realize.
The story of the breakdown long predates metal's popularity, and truly, even its existence, with roots dating back as far as the 1920s and 30s in America to the Jazz Age.
Okay, good. I'm glad they're covering this, because this is important, because the definition of a breakdown has changed. I'm sure they'll talk about this, but, it used to be that this is when it would break the song down to just like the bass and drums, and now it's changed meaning.
Before the breakdown, there was just the break, which was simply an instrumental section of a song that served to add variety to the piece by breaking up the traditional song formats. And in jazz music, that took the form of the solo break, where the instrumentalist would take turns soloing.
Right, or like the beginning of hip-hop was people sampling the drum breaks, like, Funky Drummer by James Brown, which I think, what's his name, Clyde Stubblefeld, stuff like that, or the Amen break. That was the beginning of hip-hop, is they would sample those and loop them and then, rap over it. Yeah, so many funk artists used to say breakdown before they did their breakdowns. Yeah, James Brown would be like, break it down, In the epic flute breakdown. Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Play that funky flute.
During the jazz age, the break underwent a number of different evolutions, traversing R&B, soul, and funk, where in the 1970s, it found its way embedded into hip-hop culture in the form of the breakbeat.
There we go.
In the 70s,
that's the funky drummer break, right?
Led by DJ Kool Herc, who had long been sampling drum beats from jazz and funk groups of old, developed a technique where they could essentially loop the drum patterns popular in break sections by using two different turntables, backspinning one while the other one played, so they could extend the dance-oriented sound of the breakbeat for the crowd on the dance floor. This method continued to accentuate the idea that the break was meant for dancing, allowing people in the crowd to lose themselves in the music.
Yeah, this is a really important part. The break was for dancing, which is what breakdowns are for as well. The other important thing that I feel like has maybe been missed with modern breakdowns is that the break or the breakdown was for like dynamics and variety. It was like relief in the song of like, in songwriting, there's tension and release. So as the song gets bigger and bigger and bigger and louder and louder and louder, and then they break it down, and then they come back like a drop in EDM, right? And I think that's been lost a little bit, which, we'll see if they touch on that.
Around the same time as hip-hop's breakbeat, the break was undergoing another iteration, but this time at the hands of disco music, dubbed the disco break. Developed in the 1970s by record producer Tom Moulton as a method to remix songs and extend their runtime, disco breaks were introduced as sections that were stripped down to more minimalistic instrumentations, typically falling back on the percussion and bass parts to make them easy to loop.
There we go. Don Downing Dream World. Man, I do not want to live in his dream world where there's a fucking 6 foot wide green spider crawling up on his fucking shoulder. Poor Don Downing. I hope that he is still with us and I hope he's doing well because, man, it does not sound easy to live in this guy's head. Look at that spider. Damn, Don.
Also dubbed the breakdown section, this development is what would lead to naming the technique that would eventually find its way into the hearts of metalheads worldwide. In fact, while hip-hop was developing the breakbeat and disco was creating the breakdown section, the metal breakdown was simultaneously being introduced. What we know today as the modern metal breakdown was likely introduced as early as 1973.
Okay, so 1973 is what they're saying is the modern metal breakdown. I don't know if I agree with that, but let's see. Maybe I'm wrong.
Black Sabbath's title track from their album Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. The classic elements are there. The instrumentation is stripped down to just the drums and a lone guitar riff.
Yeah, but to me, a breakdown now in the context of metal means chugs, right? That's what it means. And so I would say that the breakdown as we know it would be Raining Blood by Slayer, I think, from 1985. That's the one. I remember when I heard that, and I was just like, holy fuck, that sounds cool. Yeah, more like a riff break. Now, you can nerd out all day long about who did it first, but as far as I'm concerned, like the first time I'm aware of something that sounds anything like a modern breakdown was Raining Blood by Slayer, but I don't know.
Punchy
it's
accent
all definitional,
on the
I
offbeat
suppose.
At the tail end of the groove, giving it a slower, more moshier feel. And Sabbath's influence, of course, hasn't gone unnoticed. Slash went on record saying he believes that not one band has released a heavier riff than the breakdown on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
Well, listen, with all due respect to Slash, he has obviously not heard of a band called Amir. Slash is a legend, but I don't know that he is the person I would choose to tune into for, the authority on what's heavy, in my opinion.
Of Mastodon referred to the riff as simply unbeatable. One of the most important developments in the story of the breakdown, however, happened toward the end of the 1970s. When hardcore scenes began to spring to life in California and Washington, D.C.
Yep. The breakdown in its current form definitely came out of hardcore punk, though. Pretty sure everyone agrees with that. Yeah, I don't know. I really think it was Slayer. I mean, breakdowns as like sort of moshing is from hardcore. So in that sense, I suppose, like the two-step parts and stuff like that. But I really think it was Slayer that really laid the template for breakdowns to me. But that's just my opinion.
The year is 1983. The hardcore punk scene is picking up speed, and Bad Brains have released their eponymous debut album, which would go on to be one of the many influences that would give a name to the unruly dancing and pushing that was a staple in the crowds at their shows. Bad Brains' music, in combination with the song Total Mash by DC hardcore group Scream, are regarded as two of the main contributors in developing the term mosh.
I did not know that. Probably everybody knows this, but Dave Grohl played drums in Scream. I don't know if he played on this particular album or not, but people probably know that.
Mosh, which would go on to receive even wider recognition at the hands of Agnostic Front's Vinny Stigma. Later, moshing would see its first official use in a music title with Anthrax' Caught in a Mosh.
Great song, Caught in a Mosh. One of the best thrash songs ever written. Love it.
This period ultimately spurred the development of the breakdown in metal, shooting it into popularity within the genre once it became associated with moshing.
Yeah, gotta give Anthrax a lot of credit for that. And SOD, of course, they were like, I mean, you can ask them this, they were like very heavily influenced by New York hardcore. So definitely a lot of, heritage there from the hardcore scene. I'm surprised they haven't talked about Slayer yet, though. That better be coming.
Which makes complete sense. Crowds were already rowdy and itching to move during live shows, evident in hardcore crowds where fans were pogoing, windmilling, slam dancing, along with any number of other moves.
I'm so old that I remember when they called it slam dancing, not moshing. Is there going to be slam dancing at the concert tonight? I've heard slam dancing is very dangerous, and there better not be any of that at the concert.
And when the concepts of moshing and breakdowns...
Henry Rollins in his infamous short shorts. Look at this guy over here, meat gazing. You could just draw this line right here, right over here, some rock solid meat gazing here. And I'll be honest, I would do it too. There's nothing wrong with a little meat gazing, my friends, especially when you got a fellow in short shorts in front of you like that.
It's coalesced. It gave bands and fans alike dedicated moments
trying to tell if he's circumcised. Exactly.
Wild. And it's no surprise that the breakdown's popularity absolutely blew up from that moment on. Then the late 1980s found both metal and hardcore experimenting with breakdown styles, incorporating them regularly into their music. Metallica...
I'm shocked that they haven't mentioned Raining Blood. Like, really, I'm honestly shocked they haven't mentioned this. Like, how do you not mention this? Really? How do you not mention this? This is it. This is the template. Yeah, the first breakdown that mattered. That's a good way to put it. There's maybe other people that might have done something earlier. I don't know, whatever. But that's definitely the first breakdown that mattered. That's right. Don't let the media wipe Slayer off the map. They're trying... Never forget what they took from you. This is erasure. They're trying to brainwash you. Big media wants you to forget that Slayer ever existed. But you can take Slayer off Spotify. You can take Slayer off YouTube. You can take their records off the shelves. But you know what? You can never take Slayer out of here. Can never take Slayer from me.
Single one, and of course, Slayer's
George
iconic
Soros
Raining
is behind
Blood
it. I knew it. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So they are going to talk about Slayer, but it's a little bit out of sequence because Raining Blood came out in 1985. So I feel like it's a little bit of out of sequence here.
Down sections. Both songs, however, exemplify the battle between the speed of thrash metal and what the breakdown will become in later years.
Yeah.
Metallica and Slayer drew from their thrash metal root.
Yeah, one is a very important one as well. Absolutely. The double bass part of one, very important. I still remember when I heard that, and I was like, holy fuck, that sounds cool.
Their breakdowns.
That's right. They're taking down all the Slayer statues. That statue of Kerry King outside City Hall. The coastal elites want to tear down that statue of Kerry King outside City Hall, but we're not going to let them do it. We're not going to let them get away with it. Actually, I got to show you this. Speaking of Kerry King statues, here's a picture of him from, I don't know, somewhere in the 80s. You wear your X and I'll wear mine. This is probably from like 89 when the Malcolm X movie came out. You wear your X, meaning the Malcolm X hats that were popular at the time. If you don't know, Malcolm X was like a very important, black rights activist. He says, I'll wear mine, his Confederate flag shirt. And, interestingly, Kerry King is from like South LA. I don't know why he feels any allegiance to the Confederate flag when I believe he's from Downey, California, which is like 0% white. Yeah, a little, that's what it is. He's confused. South LA. So when he hears people say it's about Southern heritage and Southern pride, he's like, oh, well, I'm from the South. I'm from Downey. So this must be my heritage. So that's probably the confusion. Anyway, back to the breakdowns.
The original tempo of the track. Instead, utilizing syncopation and halftime feel to reach that moment of let's dance and kick ass.
To reach that moment of, that breakdown. You have that moment of post-breakdown clarity.
Little crowds love so much.
Right after the breakdown, you're like, man, I can't believe that I was just about to text that girl that crazy thing. After this this post-breakdown clarity just really gives me a whole new outlook on life. Okay, there we go. Finally.
While most
justice for Slayer
sections up to this point were fast-paced and up-to-tempo, it wasn't until 1990 that the breakdown would get its first slow, chuggy treatment with Pantera's track, Domination.
See, I do not agree with this at all. People nowadays talk about Domination as being a super important breakdown. I completely disagree. And I say this because like the 90s is when, all the hardcore bands started playing breakdowns, right? I mean, I mention them all the time, but Earth Crisis, it has to be mentioned, and Morning Again and all that stuff. Nobody was talking about Pantera. Nobody was talking about Domination. Like that was not a point of reference for anybody until many years later. And I mean, it's a great song and I love it, but I just don't agree. Raining Blood was 5 years earlier than this. And that's the thing everyone copied was Raining Blood. I just don't agree that Domination was as influential and as important as people think it is now, in my opinion. I don't remember really hearing anybody mention it. It's also not true. Like he was saying that this is the first time it was in halftime, but Raining Blood was in halftime. The beginning of that song is super fast, and then they drop it into halftime. So I know I'm arguing about bullshit that doesn't matter, but listen, arguing about bullshit that doesn't matter, talking about metal, these are the same thing. So this is what we're here to do. We're here to split hairs.
In this style, the breakdown was given the spotlight in the track. The gradual shift in tempo to the chuggy, segmented riff worked to differentiate the breakdown section from the rest of the song, making it an experience for the crowd. From this period on, the breakdown's path in today's metalcore and deathcore scene is clear. The overall influence that heavy metal played in hardcore sound from the late 1980s into the 90s is what led to the emergence of beatdown hardcore.
Okay.
A hardcore genre also known as
gotta talk
heavy
about
hardcore,
Bulldoze.
brutal hardcore, tough guy, moshcore, and simply beatdown. Beatdown hardcore implemented many heavy metal influences, from screaming, down-tuned guitars, heavier guitar riffs in general, and of course, heavy breakdowns.
We gotta talk about Bulldoze here. Oh, come on. How do you not talk about Bulldoze? Rest in peace, Kev1. Literally the inventors of the name Beatdown. The song, Nothing But a Beatdown by Bulldoze. Nothing but a beatdown. You'll catch a Bulldoze beatdown. How can you talk about beatdown and not talk about Bulldoze? Put some respect on Kev1. Rest in peace, my man.
The 1990s were a period of transformation for the hardcore genre, as beatdown hardcore became more popular with groups like Sick of It All, Sheer Terror, and Bury Your Dead gaining cult followings in the scene. The mid-90s also saw the emergence
timeline's a little wonky here, but I'll allow it.
Of groups that would become heavy hitters in the metalcore world, like Shai Hulud, Strife, and Hatebreed. Hatebreed's evolution in particular encapsulates the transition between hardcore and metalcore.
Look at the old school. Jamie is probably like 18 or 19 here. Old school Hatebreed.
Their debut album, writing the lines of the genres with elements of both hardcore and metal before adopting.
Jamie here is probably like 17. The old school Boulder lineup, again, rest in peace, Boulder.
The metalcore sound they're known for today. And their earlier music, of course, featured plenty of breakdowns. The 2000s saw metalcore explode in popularity at the hands of groups like Avenged Sevenfold, As I Lay Dying, Bleeding Through, Hatebreed, and so many others.
I mean, this is really where the breakdown became popular, was in this era, like the early 2000s metalcore, as they called it at the time, the new wave of American heavy metal, like Lamb of God and Killswitch and As I Lay Dying and all that stuff. This is what popularized the breakdown. Like, they basically took, you know, In Flames and At the Gates riffs and put breakdowns in there, and that's what made it take off.
During the same period,
which, again, those bands were not considered real metal at the time.
Groove metal was also gaining popularity with groups like Lamb of God, Five Finger Death Punch, and Devil Driver, who, inspired by Pantera
that's what I'm talking
would often
about.
build breakdowns combining heavy metal riffs with some of the groovier elements of the hardcore scene.
Groove metal.
After the mid to late 2000s came and went, the groundwork had been laid for the breakdown's home in metal, and from that point into the 2010s and beyond, it simply blossomed into abundance, with younger bands continuing to experiment and develop it.
I will say, obviously, I don't want to be the person that's like, I can't believe you didn't mention blah, 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 like they always do in my videos, but I do feel like you gotta mention Meshuggah in this, because Bleed is probably the most influential song in metal of the last 15 years, I think, right? I mean, Bleed just like changed everything for a whole generation of people. So I feel like you kind of have to mention Meshuggah in this, but listen, I don't want to be that guy telling me to mention every band.
Deathcore introduced a style of gloomy, bass drop heavy breakdowns.
There we go. A little blah.
A number of bands incorporated electronic and dubstep influences.
God, imagine talking about we butter the bread with butter, but not Meshuggah. Come on. Metal injection? More like false metal injection. Come on, people. How are you going to talk about this band and not Meshuggah? I'm outraged and offended. I'd like to speak with the manager.
I
demand to speak to the manager.
Faster, burst-oriented breakdowns. But regardless of the differences in the breakdown between subgenres and bands, the development...
Metal injection, more like poser injection. Ha ha ha. Gotcha. Better call 911 to get over that burn.
Development of the breakdown in metal culture has been a fascinating evolution that not only exemplified the ever-evolving relationship between heavy metal and hardcore punk, as the genres borrowed and exchanged ideas from one another while experimenting with it, it's also an often overlooked element of cultural unification among metalheads, both in and out of the mosh pit. At its core, the breakdown has long given us an easy excuse to connect, dance, and mosh together in the pit to our favorite
I like this upbeat tone at the end. The breakdown has long given us an excuse to bond in the pit. I like that. I like that. No wimps or posers allowed. As long as we're all moshing to the same breakdown, we're all brothers of metal. Am I right? Am I right? We're all brothers of metal right here? Well, there it is, my friends. That is Metal Injections, the evolution of the breakdown. I give it a strong 6 compared to my own video, which I give a 10 out of 10. If my video is a 10, I think this is a strong 6. That's what I think. That's right. Breakdowns of the Path to World Peace. There it is. In the meantime, make sure you check out the original video from my friends at Metal Injection. And enjoy the future evolution of breakdowns. Oh, that breakdown. Oh.